The chance for Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton to be the writer of their own story. The end of an epic battle that has captured everyone's attention and emotions. What we don't know is how this blockbuster ends. It's winner takes all. Oh, and there, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton almost coming together.
Push me off track. No investigation.
That is incredible. It's like a game of chess.
This is going right down to the wire. Christian, 10 laps to go.
We're going to need a miracle to turn it around.
Oh no, Nicholas Latifi. That will be a safety car. Hamilton stays out. Verstappen coming into the pits.
Box.
Negative.
Race control, they've decided the lap cars will stay where they are.
Why aren't we getting these lap cars out of the way?
Christian, just give me a second.
You only need one racing lap.
Race control are now saying lapped cars to overtake the safety car. So Norris and Alonso and Ocon and Leclerc and Vettel to
And it's
overtake
ending.
it.
And it's ending. Wow.
Is he right behind me with new tyres?
Copy Lewis. He had a free pit stop.
Michael, this isn't right.
We're going to have one lap of racing to decide the championship in 2021. Verstappen now snatches the championship trophy from Lewis Hamilton.
This is going to be manipulated, man.
Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
That's not right.
It's called a motor race, okay? We went to car racing.
The feeling at Mercedes seems to be, well, hang on, there seems to be an abuse of the rules here.
You just wonder what Mercedes are going to do about this.
It is controversial.
We've never seen a restart like that.
It's still very, very highly charged down here.
What's the remedy if the FIA didn't follow their own procedures?
Hello, Happy New Year and welcome to this F1 show special. A month on from one of the most controversial ends to a season in the history of Formula One. Today, we're going to look back at what happened both on the track and in race control that night, why it got so messy and where the FIA and the sport go from here. Lewis Hamilton said on team radio, "This is getting manipulated." Well, was it? There are thousands of people who believe it was, but there remains no evidence to prove that. So was it just highly questionable decision-making on behalf of the FIA? Today, we want to unpack the issues that are still being debated daily on this subject on social media and within the wider motorsport community. To start with, I'm joined by Martin Bundle, Johnny Herbert and Damon Hill. And the first thing that we want to say that this is not a programme designed to take anything away from Max Verstappen and Red Bull, a worthy world champion. Over the course of the year in 22 races, Max led 652 laps to Lewis's 303, led the championship for 15 of the 22 races. His team made the right calls at the right time, and he also had his fair share of bad luck. We want to get right into it, though, and go back to where we started. Lewis said it was manipulated. Was it? And Martin, was what happened in Abu Dhabi one of the greatest sporting injustices of all time?
It was a great shame for Formula One. We had all eyes on us, and then it was clumsy. It confused people. It upset the fans. If you start accusing people of fixing big events or manipulating, you need to have some very good evidence and/or some good lawyers around you. I don't think it was. I don't think there was time in the chaos that was the last few laps of that race to sit down and think about who do I want to win this race. I think it was an avalanche of information and requests and decisions coming from race control, and mistakes were made. I think we ended up with a hybrid fast track version of the regulations with a cloak over it of we've kind of agreed we don't really want races to finish under the safety car or the red flag. And of course, that's wrong, and mistakes were made on the evening. How you then unravel that, because Red Bull didn't do anything wrong, nor did Ferrari in third place with Carlos Sainz, for example. That's the problem. But I do not believe, knowing the people, that there was malice involved from race control.
Okay, I mean, it's the same question to all of you, really. Damon, I'll come to you next on this. There are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there. Do you feel that everything was done fairly on behalf of the FIA?
I think that obviously the Lewis Hamilton fans feel very aggrieved because, and Lewis Hamilton may well do, and Mercedes do, that the way the decision went disadvantaged them and they felt robbed. So there's a lot of ill feeling, obviously, in the Dutch camp. Of course, they're very happy with the result, but was it a satisfactory way of deciding a championship? you'd have to say it was unsatisfactory. And I think it might even have been unfair because if you look at it from the point of view of how the decision was made, it allowed some cars to unlap themselves, but not others. Now, that in itself is unfair. What it resulted with is a focus on the two title protagonists. And I don't think you can run a motor race or a championship like that. You have to apply the rules equally to all competitors. Manipulated is a very strong word. I think it was in some sense manipulated because I think that Michael Massey, the race director, was under pressure to allow this exciting, thrilling race to happen between the two drivers. And I think he caved into pressure from both sides, but possibly more from the attempt to let Max come through the field. And that's why he basically allowed only the cars between Max and Lewis to unlap themselves.
Johnny?
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest issue that we've got, of course, is the decision that was made was totally wrong. It's something that, yes, he was under pressure, but that is the position that he's been in. We've seen all sort of the people that have been there before, Charlie Whiting, for example, when they've been able to deal with that pressure that's going on. And that's part and parcel of what Formula One is all about. But when you're there to make things fair, you don't twist the rules that you think is actually going to sort of benefit Formula One. And like Michael Matthews said at the end about, well, we wanted to go racing. Yeah, you don't go racing after Sir Lewis Hamilton had done one of the best races that he'd done all season. And then you sort of take that away from him because you've sort of given the advantage to Max, who had done the right call on the pit stop, putting those soft tyres on. But you don't then change everything with the rules to allow the race to go green for that one lap when it's totally unfair. And then with the result we got at the end of it, which is very unfortunate, was totally wrong.
Okay, well, let's go back much more on this and break it down for you from the moment that Nicholas Latifi put it in the wall at turn 14. That brought out the safety car. At that point, Lewis Hamilton had an 11-second lead. So 5 laps remaining, and then the uncertainty in race control quickly appeared to escalate. It caused confusion not only on the pit wall, but with the drivers too. This is some of the team radio that we didn't have access to on the night, but gives a fascinating take on what it felt like from the cockpits of those involved.
So we have a double yellow, exit turn 14.
Safety car deployed, Max.
Daniel, medium or soft? There is 5 laps to go.
Let's go soft.
Daniel, we're box.
Yep, box.
So strap mode 1, strap mode 1.
Box.
Negative.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, copy that.
Then stuff on the track.
They got to let you.
And they did the fire thing.
Yeah.
Extinguisher is the word I was looking for.
Extinguisher, roger that.
What's the situation behind me?
So, situation is, Verstappen has pitted. He had a free pit stop. We would have lost track position to him. 4 laps remaining when you cross the line. So this field has to bunch, and then they have to send lap cars through. So it may not restart.
Is he right behind me?
He will be, once they've sorted out all the order. This is going to take a while to sort out.
With new tyres?
And copy Lewis. We would have lost track position if we had pitted.
These back markers need to get out of the way. They should unlock themselves.
Michael wants to get this race restarted. He should let us through.
Stay behind safety car. Giving massive advantage to some people.
Yeah, we should unlap and get the job done until they retire the car. Because if not, it's going to be too late.
How many cars are behind me and in between us?
5 cars between you. The field still hasn't bunched.
How many laps left?
There'll be 3 when you cross the line.
I mean, they need to start the procedure now.
Max, those lap cars are now being allowed to overtake.
Lapped cars are now allowed to overtake.
Are not, sorry, cancel that. Lap cars will not be allowed to overtake.
Oh, they're not going to overtake, actually. They're not.
Yeah, of course. Typical decision.
It's classic.
I'm not surprised.
Very strange. Very unfair. It's not my race, these guys, and I will have to race them.
He's not going to allow us to unlap ourselves.
Understood.
Okay. Just let us through and start the race. There's still lower debris down there.
And copy that, Lewis.
I don't understand why he's not letting us through. He's just messing this thing up.
So he's going to let 4 cars through.
everybody behind you will stay in position. Yeah, so everybody up to Vettel are allowed to overtake Hamilton. Okay, you've been told to overtake. You can overtake. Yep. You can overtake Hamilton. Yep.
Okay. Safety car has the green light.
Yep, you can overtake.
What are these two guys doing? They are not unlapping themselves. They need to go.
Restart like this. They restart like this. S1 for the restart.
There's cars overtaking the safety car.
No, not us. Stay where you are. Stay where you are.
I don't understand why I shouldn't be able to overtake the safety car.
Yes, it's been manipulated, man.
Oh my Lord, Max! Oh my God! Yes! Oh my God!
Oh, I'm just speechless, Lewis. Absolutely speechless.
Best checkered flag will explain what happened. We'll explain later.
Yeah, man. What? I got no idea what they did with letting cars through. Obviously, I wasn't really in that, anyways. But it seems strange.
Yeah, it was a bit unusual. Unfortunately, that pit stop at the end, which I think would have been a good idea, didn't work because they only let through some of the cars.
But why did they not let us go straight away? This is what I still don't understand.
Glad I'm not a part of that. Whatever just happened, it seemed pretty up.
Okay, Martin, just if you could, just précis the mistakes that Michael Massey made on the night.
The standout for me there is every single team and driver felt the system was against them at some point. Even Max and Red Bull, literally moments before he became the world champion. So I think the car took too long to get out of the way. I know that marshals were complaining that the race cars were coming through too fast. They were uncomfortable. We had a truck on the track, which we know we're super sensitive about in motorsport. You can't approach a crash Formula One car. It's a hybrid. The battery pack will kill you. Got rubber gloves and rubber boots on until that's safe. Then it caught fire, debris, fire extinguishers on the track. It was all taking a lot longer. The teams that were lapped were all on the radio demanding. Imagine if you were receiving that lot all at the same time, demanding, can we overtake? Can we overtake? So the message was put out, no, you can't overtake, to bat that away. And then try to sort out if and when the track was going to be ready. You know, I don't need to defend Michael Massey, but we're at the end of 39 Grand Prix in 17 months, a lot of them new venues. He was exhausted, he was under pressure, and he made some bad decisions to expedite the system and put the two cars together. I think he was swayed by the calls from Christian Horner there saying you've got to unlap these cars. I think he was trying to do the right thing, and in doing that, breached their own regulations. And the teams can't run a strategy if the race director can overrule and just change the fundamental sporting regulations as he sees fit. There were other meetings and general agreements that we're not party to. We don't want to finish races under the safety car or red flag if we can help it. He should have thrown a red flag. 5 laps to go. The problem with that is, had he have known the car was going to catch fire and how long it was going to take to get it away, the problem with that is, do you throw a red flag then every time there's a crash, 5 laps before the end of a Grand Prix? Is that the precedent you set going forward?
Okay, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? The timing didn't help him with 5 laps to go, but I see it was great insight from that team radio, but you got an indication of maybe it was the dithering there. So first of all, he said the lap cars are not allowed to overtake. Max said, what a surprise. Then 5 cars allowed to overtake, but only those 5 cars, not the 3 that were lapped in behind Max Verstappen. And finally, the safety car was called in a lap earlier than it should have been. Maybe that's the crux of it. The fact that if they'd actually followed the protocols to the letter of the law and the regulations, it should have finished under the safety car, Damon.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I think the radio calls we just listened to is absolutely fascinating and very revealing of the fact that Michael Massey and the rules and the decisions he was making were changing by the second. And they were changing by the second because he had the ambition of not finishing under the safety car, at the same time wanting to not ruin this World Championship showdown. So he had a lot to deal with, and I think he buckled under the pressure from both teams, who were on the radio. And this is something that they're going to look at and say you cannot have, people as powerful as Toto Wolff and Christian Horner badgering the race director when he's trying to sort out the race. I mean, he came under enormous pressure. Martin is absolutely right. He had a lot on his plate, and he needs backup. I think that it was fair with in the past we had Charlie Whiting and Herbie Blash was backing him up, so he had his mate next to him who could help. And I think that it was just an awful mess at the end, and it's left this chaos and a sense of dissatisfaction about how it ended.
But that's the thing, and going back to what you both touched on there, I don't think anybody, or the higher authorities within the sport, shall we say, wanted this championship season to finish under caution. Therefore, Johnny, do you feel that he may have been, and this goes back to conspiracy theories, under outside pressure, external pressure to make the calls that he did at the end?
Well, that's something that shouldn't be the case anyway. There are a lot of people, yes, on the radio, a lot of people sort of giving their sort of thoughts on what should happen, when it should happen, because they're always trying to make it benefit them. You can hear all that radio communication, Daniel Ricciardo, their soft tyres, didn't work out for him. But for Michael Massey to be the one that is under all the pressure, he's got a lot of things on his plate, he's got a lot of radio communication with all the teams. It's not just the Red Bull and the Mercedes, it's every other team that is sort of on that radio at the same time. He's then talking to the clerk of the course, he's talking to the marshals, all that information's coming back while all those drivers are talking on the radio as well to the teams, who are then talking to Michael Massey at the same time. So yes, there is an immense amount of pressure. And yes, there's been a lot of talk about we want to finish the races under green, but it doesn't always work out that way. I know many races in the past, and the precedent has always been you race as far as you can, unless there is an incident like we saw in Abu Dhabi, where that isn't possible unless you throw that red flag like Martin said. But there is so much other stuff that is going on for Michael Massey to deal with, but I think it's inexcusable where he can then sort of try and manipulate the rules to try and finish it on a green lap, which is what has been discussed with all the teams at the same time. This occasion, that wasn't really possible and shouldn't have happened.
Okay, it's the first year, just going back, and actually you wrote about this, Martin, in your article following the race. It's the first year that we've heard direct to broadcast the communications between team principals and the race director. That sort of lobbying that everybody talks about, it can't have helped matters. And I think even Toto said, well, we haven't helped ourselves on this, and maybe that needs to stop going forward. That's one of the things that might need to be adjusted.
100%. I mean, in the first safety car incident, when Giovinazzi's Alfa Romeo broke down some way from a service road, we had Toto on the radio to Massey saying, hey, Michael, no safety car, trying to influence a safety decision, and completely unacceptable. And Toto knows that. And we can't have that. What used to happen in the Herbie and Charlie days is they'd get on the radio to Charlie. Herbie would go, he's busy at the moment, he'll get back to you. And of course he didn't, because Charlie was busy sorting out the mess that was on track and working to understand when the race could be restarted. But for me, that was one of the most uncomfortable aspects of this season. We saw it in Saudi Arabia, Silverstone, team principals up in the steward's office trying to remonstrate with them mid-race. That's got to stop. That is, sitting at home. Can you imagine a manager running on the pitch and remonstrating and telling the referee the decisions he's going to be making next? No, you can't have that.
Just because we're hearing it now, it doesn't mean it's happened before. And I suppose it brings us on to the other point, and that is whether we're getting to a point in time now within the sport where entertainment is usurping the sport. This brings us closer than ever before to the action. maybe some might think that Massey's actions were, again, unfairly focusing on the entertainment at the front and trying to bring those guys together. It wasn't fair for the racing. Is that where we are? Have we reached a tipping point, a crossroads, you think, in the sport here, Damon?
Well, I was actually a driver steward one of the early days when at Monaco, when the race actually was going to finish under a safety car, and I could sense the anxiety that was noticeable, that we were going to have this race, and he'd already brought in this rule whereby the safety car was not going to parade the cars over the start and finish line because it looked awful. And I think everyone is in agreement that so we've already taken a decision so that we don't have cars finishing behind the safety car in that fashion, and they're able to make a dash for the line at least. So that is pandering to the excitement already. So whether or not this is an influencing factor in Michael Massey's decision, I would say yes. I think that they'd already had meetings in the early part of the season about letting them race. In other words, arguments over how much aggression drivers could exhibit on the track, and whether we were just being too soft, you know, in expecting them to stay within the white lines and all this business, because it's actually robbing the fans of the excitement that they want. So we're already, in this season at least, making allowances for the entertainment value. The question is whether that is transgressing what is fair from a sporting point of view. And the FIA's job is not to make the race entertaining. The FIA's job is to ensure safety and fairness. That's their job.
Let's go back to Baku, Azerbaijan. You know, that last lap dash that we had because we had a red flag. And then, that was for me, that was good that Formula One got that race back underway. So, you need to take the rough with the smooth. For years, decades, I heard, Formula One's boring. I watched the pre-race, the first lap or two, and I go back and see what happens at the end. There is an element, just like with 2020 cricket or with other sports, of energizing your sport and trying to put on the best show that you can. So I agree with Damon. If we've already got an overrider not written in the regulations, let's try not to have a race finish under the safety car and the red flag. You can either look at that as eminently sensible or show business. But either way, I think I would support it.
Okay. Talk about show business. And show business would have been a red flag, because then you would have had the fairness of having that last lap sort of battle, or last couple of laps, whatever it would have been, when they would have been on very similar tyres. Then you would have had sort of that last sort of hurrah. So that would have worked out perfectly for the show.
We throw a red flag, do we then? Every time there's an incident, 5, 6, 7, or is it 10, or is it 3 laps before the end of a Grand Prix? We automatically throw a red flag, do we?
That's a very good idea, Martin, to be honest. I mean, it gets us out of that sticky problem. But there was two solutions to the problem. There was 3. The third one was letting the race finish under a safety car, which I think that Michael Massey was desperate, and everyone was trying to persuade him we don't want to have happen. The other 2 options were you don't let the cars unlap themselves, and you maybe get 1 lap in, or you stop the race and have the 1 lap race like we had in Baku. So that wasn't the choice that he took, and he took.
And also, it was a direct. He contradicted what happened a year ago. There's a lot of people talking about the Eiffel Grand Prix in 2020 when he was defending himself about the safety car staying out for a longer period. And he actually said it's because all of the lap cars need to unlap themselves. Let's just go back quickly, if I could, to the articles in question, 48.12. And these were the ones that were protested, if you like, and then they didn't follow through their appeal. And we'll come on to that in a minute from Mercedes. 48.12, any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required to pass the cars on the lead lap and the safety car. Obviously, Red Bull questioning that any doesn't mean all, and Mercedes saying that wasn't applied fully. Then you go on to 48.13, safety car in this lap overrides Article 48.12. You've also got to look at Article 15.3, which allows the race director to control the use of the safety car. You can look at that in different contexts. The all-powerful race director, race dictator, if you want to call him that. But with regards to the application of rules, it is consistency, isn't it, Martin, that we need here? And the evidence is that we got something that was completely the opposite of what we saw a year ago.
Yeah, you can't freestyle the regulations because teams are working their strategies out, and whether they pit or not, of course, on what they understand to be the rules. And there's no doubt about it. They need to be much more rigid in that respect. And you're absolutely right.
The final thing is, I suppose these rules were written a long time ago by Charlie himself, weren't they? Do they need a rewrite? Come back to you, Martin, on that.
Well, I've always felt that lapped cars, for example, is a flawed regulation. They should drop to the back of the crocodile. But you know that it's so complicated. What is a lapped car exactly? Because if that car pits, or if indeed the leader pits, and several drivers become unlapped at that point, depending on the stage of the race. So until they've crossed the first safety car line twice, we don't even define who is lapped and who isn't lapped. It's a really complex system. But at that point, instead of elongating the safety car period by letting them pass and go, they should fall back in order to the back of the pack and get going.
Johnny, can Michael Massey survive this?
In many respects, and in all respects, no, because I think he's done too much damage to Formula One, and I think because the position that he's in, you've got to have trust. And I think that trust has completely and utterly evaporated. The problem is who do you replace him with? Because obviously experience is going to be very, very important for the man who slots into that position. You know, Michael was very fortunate. He was sort of underneath Charlie Whiting when Charlie was ahead of it, and he learnt a lot of good things from that point of view. Is there anybody that sort of stands out for me at the moment to replace him? No, and that is the conundrum.
Same question to you, Damon.
I think you should. I think he's learned his lesson. I think we need someone who's got some experience. At least people know what they're dealing with, and he just needs backup and needs to be given the confidence that he can lay down the law according to what he wants to see done, and assuming, of course, he wants it to be run according to the regulations.
Martin, your final thoughts from yourself on this one?
If the FIA and F1 want Michael Massey to stay, and if Michael Massey wants to stay, he's clearly only got one life left, hasn't he? And so I don't know if that's tenable all round. As Johnny said, who would you replace with it? Be careful what you wish for, I would say in this. And what I absolutely know for sure is that changing Michael Massey will not fix the problem. This is way too big a job for one person to handle this in a 23 race season. It's only going to grow. We're all over the world. We are, I mean, back in the day, it was 16, 18 races for Charlie and Herbie. Charlie used to start the race, and Herbie was effectively the race director until Charlie got back from the starting rostrum down near the grid. I mean, they had it all under control, but it's just growing exponentially. So Massey, if he stays, needs a lot of support around him, and I suspect that's what they're looking at the moment. And who would actually want to step into his shoes right now?
Well, I'm not sure the FIA helped themselves in the immediate aftermath of Abu Dhabi. They released a statement 3 days after. Some of the main points here, I'll just read you a section of this. The circumstances surrounding the use of the safety car following the incident of driver Nicholas Latifi and the related communications between the FIA race direction team and the Formula One teams have notably generated significant misunderstanding and reaction from Formula One teams, drivers and fans, an argument that is currently tarnishing the image of the championship and the due celebration of the first Drivers' World Championship title won by Max Verstappen and the 8th consecutive Constructors' World Championship title won by Mercedes. Following the presentation of a report regarding the sequence of events that took place following the incident on lap 53 of the Grand Prix, and in a constant drive for improvement, the FIA president, the outgoing president, Jean Todt, has proposed to the World Motorsport Council that a detailed analysis and clarification exercise for the future with all relevant parties will now take place. Let's bring in David Croft on this one. First of all, it seemed quite accusatory towards the misunderstanding of everybody else apart from themselves. And subsequently, it seems to have been a bit of an information vacuum from the FIA.
Well, the silence, Simon, is quite deafening from the FIA at the moment. We know that the formal part of the inquiry is underway. Craig Slater told us all about that yesterday, but we haven't been presented with much information. It's fine to have a misunderstanding, but where is the clarity here? I've been ringing as many people as I possibly can to try and find out exactly what's happening. What I can tell you is that Michael Massey is still very much in a job and still working in his role, responsible for the sporting side of the single-seater series at the FIA control. That's not just Formula One. Nicholas Tombassis has a role as the technical directive, as it were, on that single-seater side, but they are now both managed in terms of a line manager by a man called Peter Beyer. He is the Secretary General for Motorsport at the FIA, and he has assumed a role almost as an F1 commissioner. This was actually proposed and accepted by the World Motorsport Council before the race in Abu Dhabi. So what has happened is that Michael Massey and Nicholas Tombassis now have someone that they report into that can take a much keener interest in what is going on and give them help and support and guidance. That was, as I say, proposed and accepted before Abu Dhabi. That is not as a consequence of the Abu Dhabi race. And it certainly isn't a situation at the moment that Michael Massey is out of a job, as has been speculated quite a bit on social media this week. And mistakes were made. I think the FIA accept that. But I think what I'd like to see at the moment, to help everybody understand fully, is that report that the FIA say was presented in the immediate aftermath of the Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi. I'd like to see that presentation, that report, from that statement that Jean-Todt put out, made available to the wider public. We're trying to help people piece together exactly what happened in Abu Dhabi. Well, the FIA, come on, help us as fans and observers and help everybody understand fully, because you have the information from that report. That is there. Put it out into the wider public now. We shouldn't be waiting until the conclusion of an inquiry at the beginning of February.
Yeah, and do you think scapegoats are going to be made, or are they scapegoats? Do you think Michael Massey, as we talked about before, is going to be the only one who may suffer out of this, Martin?
He might be the sacrificial lamb. What's really important here for the FIA and for Formula One is this is not swept under the carpet and just, left for a few weeks and then get overtaken by the new 2022 cars and the tests and what have you. We need to understand what happened and why it won't happen again. And we need to reassure the fans that what they're seeing is for real and genuine, and that they're giving up their free time to watch something that's a genuine competition.
Yeah, and Damon, how damaged do you think the reputation, the integrity of the sport is right now as a result of the actions of the FIA on the night and since?
I think it would have been helpful if they had by now issued something, correct me if I'm wrong, but that says, listen, we are continuing with our promise to investigate it and we're in discussions. And I know that there's some sort of big meeting on Friday, which were presumably, or it's suggested that Toto is asking for the head of Michael Massey in return for Lewis carrying on. I don't know if that's true, but I think we've got some more information on that later. But yeah, so it's all going on. But I think that the FIA could put out something now which says where we're at, explains where exactly we're at, to appease people. As far as the reputation globally goes, there's a contradiction here with things like the events that happened in Abu Dhabi. Is that on the one hand it's awful, on the other hand it's absolutely fantastic. The interest in the sport is huge and even increased because of what happened. So we just got to get it right. We can't have races where people just laugh at us, So, and I'm afraid, sadly, Abu Dhabi was one of those.
Yeah. I mean, people have called it farcical. Final word from you, Crofty, before I welcome Johnny back in on that and the integrity of the sport.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, let's just put a bit of detail into who could replace Michael Massey. You need an experienced operator within motorsport. I've seen Eduardo Freitas, the race director for 20 years or so at Le Mans now, as tipped for as a replacement. Well, he actually shadowed Michael Massey for a weekend at a race in Portugal at Portimao. I'm told after that, he said he didn't want the job working within Formula One. Steve Nielsen is another name that has been tipped. He works as the sporting director at Formula One for Liberty Media, but another that does not want the job and doesn't want to be working for the FIA. So in terms of get rid of Michael Massey, if that's Toto Wolff's belief, you've got to have someone ready to bring in. And I don't think that person is there as it stands at the moment. What Michael Massey needs really is support, because what happened in Abu Dhabi could have been brewing for some time. He's a man that is overworked, was highly stressed, hadn't had a day off pretty much all year, and mistakes were made in the heat of the moment. It had been coming for a while.
Thanks, Crofty. Okay, let's bring Johnny back in for a final word. Back again to the start here. With regards to Michael Massey, can you see Lewis Hamilton or Mercedes going racing under his watch next season?
Well, I think it's not going to be a comfortable situation, probably for both, to be perfectly honest. I think as a driver, and for Sir Lewis, I think he feels very aggrieved that his championship was taken away, and you would not want, and I would not want, to have the man who made the wrong decision, the wrong call, which then lost me a world championship. I'd be very, very angry if he was allowed back. And I think Mercedes in a very similar way. So, there's a lot of things that need to be dealt with in the right way, especially from the FIA, to make Formula One what we expect it to be fair.
Well, I mean, Lewis has gone off grid since then. Damon, a final word before you go as well. You know what it's like. You suffered in '94 with the coming together of Michael Schumacher, and as you felt having the title stolen off you. How difficult did you find it to come back the next season?
Not difficult at all. I wanted to win a championship. Lewis has already won 7. It's slightly different. He's getting to the end of his career. And he may be many years off, but I mean, he's got a lot in the bank, and he might just think, I've done all I can do. But I'm sure that 8th title is just too tempting. I'm sure he'll want to come back and have it and put all this to rest.
Okay, well, he's got 2 years left on his contract. I'm sure all Lewis Hamilton fans will be hoping he'll be lining up on the grid in mid-March. Thanks to Damon, thanks to Johnny. Martin's going to stay with us. When we come back, though, we're going to talk about Mercedes, the protest, the appeal that never was, and hear from Toto Wolff and what he said in the immediate aftermath of Abu Dhabi. Hello and welcome back to this F1 show special, where we're looking back on one of the most controversial ends to a season in the history of the sport. In the week following the title decider, an understandably disillusioned Toto Wolff faced the world's press. This is what he had to say when he was asked whether he would speak to the race director.
I'm not interested to having a conversation with Michael Massey. What he has, the decisions that have been taken in the last 4 minutes of this race have robbed Lewis Hamilton of a deserved world championship. His driving in the last 4 races, particularly in the last 4 races, was faultless. He had a commanding lead on Sunday in Abu Dhabi from the get-go. He won the start, and he never gave the lead away again. And robbing him in the last lap of the race is unacceptable. That's why, from a personal standpoint, from a professional standpoint, I cannot my values, my sense of integrity just isn't compatible to the decisions that have been made on Sunday. And it is up to the FIA to decide going forward how these decisions, how these situations can be avoided. Expect the Commission to not only come up with words, but actually but with actions. And we will hold them accountable for the actions, because we cannot continue in a sport that is meant to be sport followed by entertainment, and not the other way around, that we are held ransom by ad hoc decisions in every field, be it technical or sporting. And therefore, there needs to be clear measures in place before the start of the season, so every driver, every team, and the fans understand what's on and what is not on. we believe we had a very strong case. And if you look at it from the legal side, if it would have been judged in a regular court, it is almost guaranteed that we would have won. But the problem with the ICA is the way it's structured. The FIA can't really mark their own homework. And there's a difference between being right and obtaining justice. We decided together with Lewis to protest, to launch the appeal, and to withdraw the appeal. As you can imagine, not only for him, but also for us as a team, it was terrible to be confronted with a decision that decided the outcome of the World Championship. But nobody of us, neither him or us, want to win a World Championship in the courtroom. Lewis and I are disillusioned at the moment. We're not disillusioned of the sport. We love the sport with every bone in our body. And we love it because because the stopwatch never lies. But if we break that fundamental principle of sporting fairness and authenticity of the sport, that suddenly the stopwatch doesn't become relevant anymore because we are exposed to random decision making, that is clear that you fall out, that you may fall out of love with that you start to question if all the work that you have been putting in, all the sweat, tears, and blood can actually be demonstrated in terms of bringing the best of possible performances on track, because it can be taken away randomly. So it's going to take a long time for us to digest what has happened on Sunday. I don't think we will ever come over it. That's not possible.
Okay, Martin, let's start with the sentiment of that. Could you see a scenario, same question as I asked to Damon and Johnny before the break, whereby as a result of what's happened and what might happen next, that Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton do pull out of the sport?
Absolutely not. Don't buy any of it, to be honest. I'm sure Toto is being asked by Lewis, what are you doing about this? Formula One is fantastically successful for the Mercedes-Benz brand. Lewis is 37 years old. We know he's driving still at his peak, incredibly determined and competitive. He'll be back. And I'm a little bit uncomfortable. Let's just put this issue to one side of a team and a driver starting to determine who's doing what in race control or in any other role in Formula One to an extent. And that's the tail wagging the dog to a certain extent. And if my driver came to me if I was a Formula One boss and said, look, I don't think I want to race anymore if that guy's still around, I would immediately stop thinking about race control and thinking, hang on, has my driver lost his motivation? Which of course he hasn't. Lewis would be back and he'll be pressing the throttle ever harder.
Okay, Craig Slater and Ted Kravitz have joined us for this part. Craig, what can you tell us about this FIA investigation? We understand there's a meeting between the new FIA president and Toto Wolff on Friday as well. And with regards to the investigation, what's going to be looked at and who's going to be talked to?
Well, this investigation, according to the FIA, and I've spoken to them a couple of times this week, began in the immediate aftermath of the Grand Prix itself. The stewards submitted their initial report in the week after Abu Dhabi, but I've learned that it only really properly got going in terms of interviewing those involved on Monday of this week, so the 10th of January. And the FIA have given themselves up until the 3rd of February at the latest. That's what they've told me to get this done. That's in advance of the World Motorsport Council meeting on that date. So they will be interviewing all the protagonists, including the stewards again, race director Michael Massey, the drivers and team representatives too. And they've put it to me that the aim for this investigation to be objective, thorough, and transparent. Now, of course, as has been observed, it's an internal investigation, but they're stressing they still think they can be objective about it. Peter Bayer is heading it up. We've heard about him now replacing Michael Massey as the single-seat president within Formula One. How significant is that going forward? Mohammed Ben Sulayem is also personally involved. He's texted Lewis Hamilton. He's taking a hands-on role at this, and he's treating it as a matter of urgency. But there are other voices, other leaders within Formula One who think he should have had much more of a grip on this as soon as he assumed office. It should have been front and center of his first news conference, and they're rather disappointed that he didn't take that opportunity to absolutely get on top of it from the word go. And there is concern that this disrupts what should be the great new era of Formula One, with the new cars coming out, looking ahead to 2022. Could that really be overshadowed if Michael Massey is kept in position by this whole feud that people are constructing between Mercedes on one hand and Michael Massey and maybe Nicholas Tombazis as well? And a number of individuals have told me this week that as much as they like Michael Massey, as much as they see that, yes, they've invested a lot of time in him, Formula One, he's had over 50 Grand Prix now, that they do now see his position as untenable. And a number of teams over the course of the last season briefed against him. Now, Mercedes have said there is no quid pro quo. We're not looking at a deal that Lewis will race or we will race if Massey goes. But I do think, despite what Martin has just said, it is hard to envisage Lewis Hamilton lining up on the grid if Massey's still race director. And I just want to finish with one little thought. Alain Prost said this week, in terms of Lewis Hamilton's mindset, he said he has as many reasons to stop as he has to carry on. That's Prost's view of this. And of course, Prost walked away from Formula One at the very top too.
Yeah, I mean, it's into the lion's den, isn't it, for the incoming or the new FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem. What did Toto mean, or what did Mercedes mean about holding the FIA accountable? How can they do that, Ted?
Well, Simon, it was quite an incredible press conference just a few days after what happened in Abu Dhabi with Toto Wolff. We felt, Craig and I were on that call, we felt he was close to tears at some point. He was clearly still emotional. He was gutted about it. He was wearing that polo neck, or was it a turtleneck, Simon? I don't know what the difference is. With that sort of concrete background as the archetypal sort of, where was he? This sort of concrete Bond villain lair. But he was seething with anger about it. He was asked straight out, do you need Michael Massey's resignation to go racing next year? He wouldn't answer it directly, but by saying, I have no interest in talking to Michael Massey, I think it was pretty clear. But, it was just all about explaining why they didn't go ahead with the appeal. And that was the weird thing for a lot of fans out there, Simon. People were thinking that they were frustrated because they wanted to test the theory. Toto said, look, we were very sure that we were on safe legal ground, that if we had gone ahead with the appeal, we would have won. So everyone thought, well, why didn't you? Well, Toto said, as we heard from him earlier, that really they didn't trust the system. This speaks volumes as much as anything else, that you felt that the International Court of Appeal, the ICA, the FIA Court of Appeal, was like marking its own homework, that they wouldn't do anything other than effectively side with their own organisation, with Michael Massey, and back up the decisions that Massey made in Abu Dhabi. So to obtain justice, Mercedes felt that it just wasn't, they weren't going to get justice if they had carried on with the appeal down that road. Now, what does justice mean for Mercedes? Well, let's not beat about the bush. Justice for Mercedes means that Lewis Hamilton is the 2021 world champion. And they weren't going to get that because they wanted, what Mercedes wanted to do was for the FIA to call the race conclusion on the penultimate lap, not on the final lap where Verstappen wins, on the penultimate lap where Hamilton wins. As soon as they decided that they weren't going to get the justice they wanted in that, they thought they weren't going to do it. And so, as Craig says, they're left with this offer, the FIA's offer of an investigative commission, which will look at how and why Massey came to those decisions in Abu Dhabi, and, Simon, the wider issue of FIA governance throughout the season, which Mercedes feel, starting particularly in Brazil with the rear wing issue, for which they got disqualified from qualifying, and through to the Brazil Max Verstappen going off and not getting a penalty at turn 4. Mercedes feel that this year there's been a pattern of some pretty questionable governance decisions.
Okay, well, if the FIA are always, or they have been, their own judge and jury, how does it change then going forward? Say, for example, we were to get a decision like this in the future. Do you think the teams might be pushing for an independent regulatory body to adjudicate over these kind of decisions? Are the FIA going to allow that? Surely that would weaken their position. Martin, what do you think is the answer there, and what will actually satisfy Mercedes' needs on this?
You can go to the civil courts in any sporting situation, but usually in my experience, the first and foremost, those law courts will say, go to your governing body. That is the organization that is there to adjudicate on these things. But it has happened in the past with Flavio Briatore, for example. So yes, maybe somebody else to look at the system, but the International Court of Appeal is supposed to be very neutral in this, and we've seen it in the past working quite well. So, how many layers and levels do you want to put into place? At the end of the day, you've got to trust your governing body.
Yeah, but then why continue if you don't, Craig, trust your own governing body?
I think it was said earlier, Crofty said that mistakes have been made. Now, what we haven't had so far is an official admission mistakes have been made. I'm not sure Mercedes want to turn the Formula One world upside down. They've accepted Max Verstappen as champion. Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton both congratulated him. Surely, let's hold them to what they've actually said, that they want more robust decision making, and end to ad hoc tinkering with the rules, and clarity and consistency in that. So I think an admission that what was done in Abu Dhabi wasn't right, maybe under the pressure of the circumstances, that would go a long way to suiting them and to calming them. Might they want the removal of one or two individuals? I don't think they're necessarily alone in questioning Michael Massey's position as race director. So let's see how he fares.
But Mercedes' point, Simon, is a wider thing about the sort of random FIA governance that we've had this year. And this extends to driving standards as well. And they just think that the Mercedes can own. And let's face it, Mercedes have a hell of a lot of leverage here, don't they? So in a sense, whatever they want from the FIA, they're likely to get. And they want to put in place some new rules about how we go racing, about whether some strong arm driving standards are going to be actually enforced and regulated. And we're not going to have all the nonsense that we had last year. They also want the fact that no team principal will be able to talk and influence the race director during a race. And I think that's something that's going to happen as well. But it's really something that needs to happen quite quickly, because nobody can move on, can they, until the FIA actually explain their decisions, the rationale and the intent behind those decisions in Abu Dhabi.
Okay, Craig, thanks very much for the moment. Let's bring in Rachel Brooks, who is our social media correspondent on this one, has been across everything that's been going on, because there has been, we talked about it, didn't we, Rachel, all season about either Lewis or Max, that polarized opinion. Unless you're a Max fan here, all the vitriol seems to be aimed at the FIA. Is that continuing?
It is, but actually, Simon, what's been really interesting about this is it's not just Max fans versus Lewis fans. This is the fans versus the FIA in this instance. It's much bigger than just the driver rivalry that we have seen throughout the season. When you think about that race and you think about the audience we had that weekend, it's the biggest audience we've had in a very, very long time for a Formula One race. So many new fans coming in to watch what we'd all been talking about and trying to enthuse about all season. And they left confused. These new fans left very confused. They didn't understand what had gone on. A lot of us left confused as well. And we've been in it a long time. And those hardcore fans, the existing long-standing fans, they're very knowledgeable. They know what the precedents are. And they saw something they hadn't seen before. So there was a lot of anger, and that's understandable. But that hasn't gone away. And that's what's really important in this, I think, because as Ted was saying, if we move on from this, we need answers. We need the FIA to explain it. The fans need that. They haven't forgotten this. They are still as loud and vociferous as ever. There's a lot of feeling that Mercedes couldn't plan for the regulation that was used. Normally teams try and plan for regulations being implemented. They couldn't plan for what happened in that race. So they can understand from that point of view. They're calling for the investigation to be independent. As Ted said, it's marking your own homework. Do they trust the FIA to investigate the FIA's decisions on this? The FIA need to get this right, because they need to convince fans that they've got their house in order and that the sport's integrity is not in question. And that's what the fans are calling into question right now. We've seen a lot of reaction to it. We've seen a lot of celebrity reaction to it. I mean, we've all been bombarded with messages from people, and we understand it. We're fans of the sport as well. And I think that's really important. We had a tweet from an American footballer, an NFL player, JJ Watt. He's got 5.6 million followers, and he said that's insanity. Now, that's a lot of reach, and that's a lot of reach in America, which is a market that Formula One seemed to have broken into this year. Let's not lose those American fans as well, because we're still trying to explain the sport to them in a lot of instances. But also the fans are asking, what kind of sport do we have if the race director can apply regulations that in their eyes seem to be controlling a narrative? Now, this sport's phenomenal. It's really entertaining, but I think the concern from fans at the moment is it entertainment, and is the entertainment now more important than the sporting competition? And that's an answer that really needs, a question, sorry, that really needs to be answered by the FIA.
Yeah, can I be a contrarian on this one,
Yes.
Michael, and go back to one man who might have thought that the more outraged the fans get, the more eyeballs are on the sport, and that being Bernie Ecclestone. He used to espouse that theory, didn't he? That, okay, maybe we've gone one step too far, but I can't remember in the time that we've been doing this, as Rachel said, more interest in the sport.
Yeah, you know, the old adage that all publicity is good publicity, but you know, you can't confuse and anger your fans. We know from our amazing Sky audience that we had on the day that 34% of them were new to Formula One, and so we need to make sure we carry them along on the journey, and that they don't, you know, confuse people, step away from things. They don't understand, they don't buy things, they don't engage if they're confused. So you know, we didn't do ourselves proud, as we said right from the beginning of this show. But I would reiterate a couple of things I've said, that we have to explain what happened and why it won't happen again. And you have to accept that Mercedes-Benz and Sir Lewis and all of his fans will forever feel that world championship was stolen away from him. And I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned at the start of the program, the shades, aren't there, of 1989, where Senna, you know, felt that the thing was weighted towards Alain Prost after the coming together at Suzuka, and how he had to apologise, didn't he, to Balestra and to FISA, as it was at the time, so he could get a racing licence for 1990. He felt hard done by. It's not the first time that a driver has felt hard done by. But do you think there will be an asterisk always over this season from all sides, Ted, or will that be forgotten in time?
I mean, it'll be something that we all remember. You know, we all remember what happened, as you say, in 88 and 89 with Senna and Prost. We'll all remember what happened with Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher in 1994. You know, on the balance of it, Max Verstappen ended up with more wins and more points. So you've got to say he deserves the championship. But yeah, we'll always remember 2021 with this very, very unsatisfactory ending. I think just saying what you're saying about, you know, no publicity, all publicity is good publicity, that's different, because in the past we've had, you know, teams on one going against teams on the other. It's not this case. It's the team, Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes, against the governing body of the sport. And that's where the fans feel that what happened in Abu Dhabi was so wrong, and where Mercedes maybe feels so wronged, and where F1 has got a problem with sorting out its integrity and its confidence that people have in the sport. Because, you know, many fans are asking, as Rachel says, if those in charge just didn't want Lewis Hamilton to become an eighth-time world champion, win the world championship, and if those in charge just didn't want Mercedes to win the Drivers' World Championship. And that's the issue, whether it's some sort of conspiracy. And that's what this commission needs to put to bed once and for all. And this commission from the FIA needs to put it clear that, look, there was no conspiracy here. It was just a misinterpretation, a misdirecting of our own rules, if that's what they find. Because, of course, the ultimate question is, would Michael Masi have made the same decision had it been Max Verstappen in the lead on old, knackered, hard tyres and Lewis Hamilton behind on fresh, soft tyres? And that's what really the question about that, I think, in the fans' mind, is what's eating away at the credibility in a Formula One. And that's not a good thing, is it, Simon? That's bad for Formula One. If in fans' minds, as Rachel's been saying, that there's a question about the integrity and credibility of F1.
Yeah. Did you see any point in there, Ted, where Masi had time to sit and work that out?
Well, there was that 4 minutes. It was that 4 minutes, wasn't it? I'll never forget it. Between 18:27 and 18:31, there was that 4 minutes between when he decided that lap cars wouldn't overtake and that lap cars, then the 5 cars would overtake. And so what happened in that crucial 4 minutes? And that's what the FIA need to absolutely be totally crystal clear about and show the fans they have explained what happened. Why did Masi change his mind? Did he have his mind changed for him? And they have to be totally clear, because it is the credibility of the sport that the fans are talking about. The fans think what happened was wrong. Mercedes think what happened was wrong. Lewis Hamilton thinks what happened was wrong. And we need to sort that out.
I have to say, it's not just Lewis fans on this. It actually is wider than that. And I think that's why it's so important we get the answers we need from the FIA.
Absolutely. Brilliant stuff. Thanks very much, Rachel. All right, we're going to take a short break. Big thanks to Martin too. When we come back, we're going to look ahead if we can, because there's a new set of rules and regulations for 2022, and get excited about the new season. Welcome back to the final part of this F1 show special, where we've been dissecting the final race of the season. And before we try to throw it forward to what we hope will be an exciting new season, an exciting new era, I want to first bring in Anthony Davidson and Karun Chandler. Karun, you were with us in Abu Dhabi. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I'll ask you the same question I asked the guys at the start. Do you think it is one of the greatest injustices in the history of this sport?
It certainly feels like there could have been a fairer outcome. I don't believe it was premeditated. You know, I don't believe Michael Masi sat there and thought, I've got to figure out a way to make Max Verstappen world champion. I don't think that was the case. I think there was a lot going on at the end, and he made some wrong decisions. I think there were 3 things he could have done which were fairer and actually would have been procedurally correct. One is ask the lap cars to go past a lap earlier, because then all the 9 cars would have got past. And then he would have also given himself time to follow the regulation about the safety car doing 1 extra lap before coming in. So procedurally, he would have done everything right. And you just go, you know what, it was bad luck for Lewis that Latifi crashed. That's sport, that's what happens. But that wasn't followed. Having not followed that, he should have just left the lap cars in between Lewis and Max. And then it would have been a fair outcome, because Max would have had to pass 6 cars. And Ant and I talked about it. We would have had a superbly exciting final half lap of the race, I think, with the tyre delta. And the third thing, I suppose the cleanest thing would have been, which you guys have talked about, is do a red flag and a restart like Baku. So I don't think it was the fairest outcome. I think Lewis did everything right to deserve to win the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But the World Championship, as Martin said, is decided over 22 races. And I think you can't say that Max Verstappen wasn't a deserving world champion, because, you know, all 22 races count the same.
Okay, in that press conference that we heard from Toto, the only time that he's spoken to the public and to the press, Anthony, he did use the word, robbed. You've been into Brackley, you've been in the sim. We'll come on to what the new car feels like in a few moments' time. Is that the general consensus down there from the team?
It's funny, Simon, before the race happened, I said to them, look, what about this predicament where you can choose one? You can choose one winner to win the championship, or for Lewis to win the Drivers' Championship. And they all said, without question, without hesitation, we'll take the team constructors, we'll take the constructors. That's where their bonus money is, and it's before Christmas, so they all want this for the pride of the cars that they've worked on in the factory, the pride of those 1,000 people at Brackley. But when push came to shove, of course, they all wanted the Drivers' Championship. That's the one where you have that prestige. But look, they were really bruised from it. They still are, and rightly so. It was unfair, like Karun said. I think they were really robbed. Lewis was robbed of that race victory, without question. Yes, it was manipulated to finish under racing circumstances with only 5 cars allowed to overtake. Really unfair on the cars who are racing those other 5 cars, in my opinion. If I'd been one of those drivers watching that group of cars overtake, I would have been gutted and really disappointed. And there are more than just 2 people in that race, don't forget. So some really unfair decisions were made all over, I thought, and totally robbed of a race victory. Wasn't robbed of the championship. That's a different story, because Max had his fair share of bad luck as well throughout that season. So many occasions where, like the tyre blowout in Baku, for example, being wiped out pretty much of the race in Budapest. None of that was his fault. Lots of bad luck. But in that race, totally robbed for Lewis. So, yeah, he's bitter about it. He's bruised. And I tell you what, though, Simon, if one thing to motivate a team, having just won their 8th Constructors' World Championship, because you could get complacent, there's no better way to motivate that team of strong 1,000 people plus in Brackley to come back this year fighting ever harder than before. The other teams might go on to regret that.
Lewis will be back, won't he? You know he'll be back.
I'm sure he will be. I mean, God, I would want to be. If that just happened to me, who wouldn't want to get back into that car this season and go and put things right? Because I'm sure that's what he wants to do.
Let's move it on, because we want to, because we're going to be talking about this ad nauseum. We're going to be talking about it, I'm sure, into the start of next season. But we do have a brand new era of regulations, don't we? Totally changed in terms of aero regulations. 23 races, of course, Ted, including Miami, return of ground effect, underbody tunnels. What can you tell us about these new cars for 2022?
Well, yeah, part of the reason that we need to, the FIA needs to sort themselves out is because already we're getting inevitably with new cars, and they're going to look much more jazzier, the cars this year. There are lots of questions being generated by all the teams that need a ruling from a kind of technical delegate and a race director, which we need the FIA. That's part of the reason why the FIA need to make their decisions quite quickly, because there's lots going on. They're very different cars. They're relying a lot more on air passing underneath the car very quickly, which sucks the car down onto the ground and gives it what they call ground effects. Cars that we used to see in the sort of early 80s, relying a lot more on that, which should make the cars behind a lot more easy to race the cars in front. So we don't get these races where we only see sort of 5 or 10 overtaking moves per Grand Prix. So hopefully they should be a little bit harder to drive, the cars. It should be better racing, better following, not much less of the dirty air. But with this ground effect, a lot of the teams are concerned that there are going to be further discussions and controversies about bits of the cars, being able to sort of come off and be damaged. If you thought bendy rear wings was going to be was a hot topic last year, well, it's going to be a hot topic this year as well. So plenty more going on. But Simon, we're seeing a lot of positive sounds out of Mercedes. After all, they kind of gave up on development of 2021 so that they could specifically concentrate on 2022. And Karun, Anthony, I don't know what you're hearing as well from Ferrari. I'm hearing a lot of positive moves out of Ferrari, positive noises out of Ferrari. The engine's going well, and they say the car is looking much more aggressive than it has in any of the recent Ferraris we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think, Ted, I had a couple of conversations with people just before Christmas, and they were very optimistic because they feel like they made big gains on the power unit side. They're coming back, not quite on par with Honda and Mercedes, but not a million miles behind. And they're confident that, that side of it will be okay. And on the chassis side now, they've been able to focus a lot of resource throughout last season because they haven't been in a championship fight, unlike Mercedes and Red Bull. So they're very optimistic that they will be in the fight come the start of the season.
And what does it feel like in the sim, Anthony? And has George been in there? Tell me about the keenness of young George Russell. I should imagine he'll be in there sort of morning, noon and night.
I mean, I'm not going to give away any secrets, of course, how the car feels. But George has been in. And as you'd imagine, super keen. And it's great to see, he's so full of energy. And this is his big moment, isn't it? His chance to step into, hopefully, for his sake, a car that can run right at the sharp end and have Lewis Hamilton as your yardstick to the best in the business to measure yourself against. And there's nothing more than a driver wants, so like George, to go head to head with Lewis in the same equipment And this is the time when you can really see whether you're good enough or not.
Are we going to get the promised wheel-to-wheel racing, do you think, Anne?
Yeah, of course. I think, well, you mean in terms of the two drivers?
In terms of improved, yeah, since improvement of the dirty air, cleaning it up.
Yeah, the dirty air. So I thought you meant George and Lewis. They'll be racing hard, of course. But look, hopefully, because like Ted described, you've got more ground effects. You've now effectively got skirts and you've created a vacuum to that diffuser. So it's the same diffuser, it's bigger, it's longer, it's more effective, but also it's in this vacuum. So that creates even more suction to the ground. So you're relying, hopefully, less on the wings to be giving you your grip and more on the floor. And the floor, critically, is less affected by following a car in front. So it should be more along the lines of how the F2 drivers race each other. That's what I'm hoping for. The DRS will be more powerful than the F2 cars are, but maybe not quite as powerful as the cars from last year and the year before. But yeah, they're going to be quite different to drive for the drivers, but fairly similar lap times, I should imagine, especially by the end of the season.
I think more than the cars, though, I'm looking forward to seeing George versus Lewis. I mean, I think for me, that's the most exciting thing going into the season is George going to be surprised by just how good Lewis is? Or is it going to be the other way around? We don't know. We won't know till we get to that opening Grand Prix in Bahrain.
Yeah, but Karun, he has to be, George Russell has to be going for the World Championship, doesn't he? If you're in a Mercedes, you have to be going for the World Championship. And that's what the other thing that Lewis Hamilton has to deal with. Hamilton has to get his head together wherever he is, in Colorado or in Hawaii or wherever he is in LA. He has to get his head together. He has to get over the pain of Abu Dhabi. He needs to be reassured by the FIA that everything is going to be fair and that he's going to be able to actually race. And he needs to expend all that mental and physical energy and risk his life, as they all do, let's face it, and know that actually it's going to be fair at the end of the day. And then he has to deal with a hotshot new teammate as well. So it's such a big job for Hamilton, and deal with Max Verstappen, who's going to be high on confidence, of course.
Final one, do we think we're going to get a kind of breakout team? Do we think we're going to get a Brawn from 2009, someone who's going to absolutely ace the new regulations and come out with a car that's, I don't know, a second ahead in testing?
You could do, Simon. Yeah, you really could do. And that's the exciting thing about this season. Nobody knows. How much has Ferrari invested in this season? As Ted pointed out, and Karun, with your knowledge after speaking to a few people in the team, they could be the ones to run away with this championship. Nobody really knows. It's all about, this token system is so strict now, and it confines people, restricts them in how they can develop their cars, not just in this season, but before this season as well. And whilst Red Bull and Mercedes were having to balance things out, how much do you invest in the 2022 season versus you still want to go for that championship and win, like Mercedes did, that 8th championship, or Red Bull, the first in a long time. But there's still an eye on this year. But Ferrari could just go full steam ahead for this year. Right, the last 2 years, scrap that. Let's just look at what we can do to this new regulation car. And they might, for all we know, might run away with it.
Chaps, thank you very much for your company, Ted, Anthony, Karun, and to everybody else from the team for this F1 show special. It's been a pleasure having your company. Look forward to speaking more as we get through the car launches and into testing, the first of which is in Barcelona, the February the 23rd to the 25th. Stay tuned to Sky Sports News and to skysports.com for the findings of the FIA investigation, the future of Michael Massey, and crucially, the future of Lewis Hamilton. There we go. It didn't cover itself in glory, did it? The sport and the final day of the season. Can they right it? We shall see over the next few weeks. From us all here, it's bye for now.
Sky Sports F1. Feel it all.